Hello, everyone. Well, I had a very special Christmas in many ways, but particularly because um, my partner's mother found something very special in a secondhand store. So in 1967, there was a bit of a depression going on in the UK, and the proprietor of the Daily Express teamed up with the proprietor of the Daily Telegraph in Australia to create something called the London to Sydney Marathon. Uh, it was a race from London across Europe to southern India, across the Indian Ocean to Perth, and then all the way to Sydney. It basically didn't make its money back, so it was never held again. But it was a distance of over 10,000 miles. 98 crews started, 56 finished. The winner was a man called the team of Andrew Cohen, Colin Malkin, Brian Coyle, Roots Group. They're all British. The British people won in a Hillman Hunter. And you can read more about that on Wikipedia, but as was the style of the time, and very often when it came to movement, if we go all the way back to Nellie Bly and stuff, they made a board game. So this is an original 1968 Daily Telegraph Channel 9 Australian version of the board game. I'm not sure what the UK version looked like. It is a beautiful expression of sort of what gaming was, back then. So it comes with a 4-panel board. I'm going to try and sort of show you bits of it. So the Australian board is 3 panels. Hang on. That's right. I'm missing the one in the middle there, but this is like that's coming in at Perth. Yes, that's coming in at Perth, and then going across South Australia, and then coming to Sydney for the finish. And on the other side, somewhere, you can see that they start in. Let me find the start space. There we go. So starting here in England, these little time control spaces. And there was basically a system where you had a certain number of moves, a certain number of times that you had to get to each space, or you would suffer a lateness penalty. And it's quite a beautiful looking board. It goes through all the countries, and you've got border controls. And I'm just having a look at the mechanics now. It's like a lot of board games throughout history. It's designed to teach you a bit about the world. So there's, pictures about each culture that you're going through. You can see on this, like here we have, what do people look like in Syria? What is the flag of Romania, which is, what the British called it back then? Where is Lake King? Here you can see Parisian people wearing sunglasses in the Alps. So that's all sort of the board. Then we have 2 types of dice. We have a regular die that's a 0, 3 25s and 2 50s, which is kilometers. And I think each one of those spaces is 25. And then we have a speedy dice, which has got a 0, a 2 25s, a 50, a 75, and 100. So a bit more spread out. There are 4 miniature cars, which are pretty well nicely plastic molded. If you like, when I was playing games in the 80s, this was the same sort of standard that you got in the Game of Life and stuff. So plastic molding, which was really one of the reasons why there were so many board games coming out in the 60s, is because plastic molding and cardboard printing had a big jump. There appear to be whoever originally owned this has also put a map of the world in here, which is quite nice. Or maybe it came with it. It does seem to have the game on it. Or maybe it was just published for the marathon, so you can keep track. So we got a little score pad here. teeny tiny score pad, and 4 types of cards. We've got Dunlop service cards. We've got Amco service. Actually, we've got different. I think it's depending on where in Amoco, depending on where you are in the world. We have other kinds of assistance cards. I think these are your sort of you can use those later to help you out. We have emergency cards, which bad things that happen to you, and we have some border crossing cards, which are sort of random. Like, so when you cross the border, you could be slower, it could be faster, and so on. So there's a green car and a yellow car and a pink car and a purple car. Oh, there's also penalties you can take as well. So 5 different types of cards. Things that can boost you, things that can slow you down, things that are random. And we've got the rules here. The idea of the game is to complete the drive from London to Sydney with the most meritorious performance. The most meritorious performance will be that of the player who has the least time recorded against him. By skillful use of the dice, a player may try to avoid emergencies, penalties, border crossing, bad weather, service difficulties, collisions, etc., and land at the time control within each scheduled time. This is also a thing I love here is assistant cards are provided to replace dice throws, and options to use them rest with the players. They don't do this anymore, but they used to always tell you that the game was awesome. So the last sentence of the introduction is, the game is one of shrewd driving and excitement. That's pretty good. So I'm just going to have a look at the rules here. The red and green dice, as we mentioned, these represents miles. You can throw you have to throw either both dice or the green dice only, which is the slower dice. Okay, don't say why. The slots on the map, yes, definitely are 25 miles. We'll see if we can figure out what we do. Players for the highest total goes first. Shuffle all the decks. Yep. One player is elected the time control steward. Fantastic. Yeah, if there are insufficient players, the time control steward can be a non-player. Marks on the time card. You also use that for your starting point again in Kabul and Perth. Right. You throw 2 dice and you use one of them. No, hang on. You add them up, right? Or you roll them and add them, or you just roll the green dice, because if you roll 2 zeros, you have mechanical trouble and must take a service card. And then roll again and move. If you roll 2 zeros, you just keep going. You roll 3 zeros in a row, you are out of the game. So that is 3 double zeros. So the chance of rolling a double zero is 1 in 36. So if you roll 3 zeros in a row, your card just blows up and you're out. Not fun, but also realistic. Now the reason, so if you roll the green dice, you move less distance. And the reason you might want to do that is you have to get there exactly. If you fail, you go back at least 50 miles. To a point at least 50 miles on the correct approach to the time trial. Oh, you can turn around. Oh, wow. But if you do turn around and overshoot again, you lose full 24 hours. So you're trying to be precise, right? So you might want to roll that green dice just to get, because it's basically a 0, 3 1s and 2 2s. So you're trying to really land on that. So you basically, yeah. So a lot of the time you want to roll both dice to get a bunch of speed, but as you get closer, you have to kind of figure out when you're going to put the brakes on, which is a pretty good mechanic. And then you allowed to be a little bit late. If you're slowing down too much, but if you go too far late, you take an extra 24 hours. You must roll at least 75 to start. Crossing the channel does some extra things. Wow. Okay. You okay. You get a random delay at each of the major ports where you have to just keep rolling until you get a certain total. So that's just sort of adding a bit of random chaos. There are 12 time controls. At each time control, the total time is carried forward to the next leg, and he remains at the time control. Yeah, so you basically you wait for everyone to catch up, and then you do it again, and for each section. So we can see that there's if you're coming down here from Delhi to Bombay, you've actually got a really long space. You want to get there within 23 hours with a lateness time of 12. So if it takes you more than 35 hours to move that space, you'll be delayed. You'll get a day penalty, and you've got roads blocked by processions here, which will lose you 6 hours, presumably, if you land on those spaces. The spaces are very, very tiny. You'd have to be very careful to actually track where your car is. They're just way too big for these spaces. So that's a big flaw. But, right. Um, if you land on a line with a red cross, you take an emergency card. And those are, I think those are bad. Yeah. If you land on a black or white line, you have to take a customs card, which I think they mean might be a border crossing card, because I don't seem to have a customs card. Yep. Oh no. Yes, they've just changed the name somewhere in the rules. If you land, if you if you if you pass every time, if you land or pass a blue line, you have to take a service point. Right, so those are the blue cards. You have to get your car serviced, and they can be good or bad. When you go through a passage control, you can use an assistance card, which are where do you get assistance cards? How do you get assistance cards? Let's have a look. There's the option of passing this next roll or using an assistance card. The assistance card is basically some sort of benefit. Yep, cool. So this lets you sort of power up. If you land on a red line, exactly, you take a penalty. There are weather hazards. If you land on or within a weather hazard, you lose 5 hours. Place your cards face down as you use them. That's nice. All time is cumulative. The player with the lowest time at the end is the winner. Yeah, how do you get assistance cards? That's the only thing I can't see. Time controls, la 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 la. Yeah. All right. The time control card must be recorded with each player, or it will be impossible to keep track of the score. It must be tallied up at each time control. As each player rolls dice or takes an assistant card, throw is recorded. All penalties are recorded at the time of occurrence. If a player rolls a die that lands his card on the same line as a player, they have collided with them and will be penalized 10 hours. So get out in front is going to be good. Right. Except the time controls. Okay, I think you can choose not to roll. You can choose instead to take a card. That seems to be what they're implying there. Ba, 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 ba. The good thing about having the board split like this means that you can you don't have to put the whole board on the table at once. Maybe some games should try that again, right? Because there's all these things about table hogs. What if your table didn't need to have everything on the table at once? Yeah, I don't know how you get assistance cards. Maybe by yeah. Okay. Each roll of the die represents the number of miles covered in 1 hour, so you can actually drive 150 miles. Not bad. Which is basically up to 6 spaces. Yeah, okay. Hmm. Okay, let me have a look. So the assistance things. Now, if you arrive early, you don't actually get a bonus. So um, you don't actually want to go too fast, I guess. Just it's more about being exact than being fast. That's interesting. Okay, red crosses, you get an emergency card. Border crossing, you get a border crossing. Blue, you get a service card. Red lines, you get a penalty. And okay, I think instead of rolling, you can take an assistance card instead of having your turn. They just haven't written that down somewhere. They forgot to put that rule in. Yeah. So, yeah, you are basically just rolling some dice, choosing whether you roll the slow dice. In that case, I got a 25. Putting the pedal down, I got 125. You're moving your little spaces across, crossing borders, having some bad things, some good things. You can skip your turn to get an assistance card, it seems. Yeah. Something about assistance controls. That's the thing they've left kind of vague, unless it's on the cards or something. But yeah, so it's sort of roll and move, but it's got this thing where you have some choice about exactly what you roll. And you've got push your luck, and yeah, and you just put an X here basically every time you have your turn, and add up everything at the time controls. Quite a lot of pads here. This has clearly never been played, but you could actually probably have a pretty good time with this, because like it actually has a sort of, it has some interesting tactical choices about which dice to roll when. And the fact that you don't actually care if you're early. So in some cases, because you want to land more on, oh no, you wouldn't want to go slowly. You might want to speed up when there are penalty lines, or weather to sort of drive through them. So, but otherwise, you mostly just want to go through them and get fewer penalties, basically, and try to land there exactly. Um, and I guess what you would do is slow down a little bit, and yeah, that increases your odds that you will land on a red line or a red cross. And I think those are bad. What are the red lines again? Take a penalty card. Okay, so yeah, so if you go slower, you're more likely to land on some of the things that slow you down. So you kind of want to go fast, but you also need to time it so that you you end up in the right spot. So for example, coming out of Delhi here, you might want to go fast, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, you're okay. That's 150, 175. Yeah. So if you roll really high coming out of Delhi, you're probably gonna hit here, but you basically have to sort of look ahead and go, okay, well, I've got pretty low odds of hitting that, so I might go speedy, slow down to hopefully get through there. But then I'll go, but if I roll a certain number, I might hit the red line. Then I want to speed up again. So you're making a choice every time you play. And if you're ahead, you can take a space basically to take a turn to get those cards because you know you're going to make that by a certain point. So that's some interesting choices, right? Every turn you've got to choose, if I'm ahead, I might take an assistance card for later. If I'm behind, I might speed up. But I've also got to prick my luck to make sure I get what I want to roll. And then you've just got the fun of roll and move and see what happens to me. So it's going to tell a bit of a satisfying story because, hey, you might have that game where I just couldn't land in Delhi. I kept driving past it, or I got there so quickly. And I think that's one of the things I really like about games is that even if you're winning or losing, they produce a story. There's a narrative that is produced in your head from the way these random elements happen. So would I play this? Possibly once, possibly with children, because it seems like it has a lot of interesting storytelling, and it actually has some interesting results on the dice. So no designer on here, unfortunately, but I applaud you, 1968, for not just doing the bare minimum here. You've done a game that, especially for 1968, is pretty decent. And made some lovely looking cars and a lot of different variety in the cards. There's like so many cards. There's like 50 of the service cards, maybe 30 assistants. Like there's a lot of different things that can happen to you. And that they've understood that that's where the fun of the game is, right? And they're sponsored, right? So you're fitted with sporty Dunlop SP3 radial tires, which have incredible road holding, especially in the West. Engine wear reduced because you're using Amoco oil, running on super permeable multigrade oil, advanced 75 spaces. So, and this is actually a lovely catch-up mechanic because when you roll zeros, you get the cards. So you have a catch-up mechanic, which is nice, and yeah, you've got borders are quite characterful. You know, you're friendly with the staff, advance 50 miles. You accidentally cross the border on a side road, go back 50 miles. So you get that wonderful sort of like, what's going to happen to me? And it's not all written on the board. Traffic jam at the customs barrier, add an hour. Marathon officials have speeded up the checking procedure, advance 100. All sorts of things that can happen to you. Let me have a look at some of the emergencies. Driver accidentally fall asleep, nearly causes an accident, add 8 hours. That's a nasty emergency. Here we go. You've skidded out of control and injured your co-driver. Count 2 hours each roll to the next time control. Wow, so you take an extra 2 every roll. Rough. What else? Let's look at some of the penalties. Penalties. Repairs to the distributor, add an hour. You are given the wrong directions by a local inhabitant, add 5 hours. Tires blow, add 5. You roll your car, add 15 hours. Heavy fog, add 6. So these are just slowing you down. But I think that also is a good choice to have these being very random, because that actually captures the feeling of long distance relays. Like, they are endurance races because your cars break down, you fall asleep, you get lost. We don't have that as bad these days. Unless you're doing something like a really sort of remote thing like Ewan McGregor's Wrong Way Round or something. But that is very often still to this day, there is that great experience of like endurance road driving. Is like, we don't have a way out of this. We are going to spend 24 hours waiting for someone to come and find us, or we have to go to a nearby village and pay a bunch of people to help us dig our car out of the mud. My friend's brother flipped his motorcycle somewhere in Kazakhstan about 20 years ago, and basically had to just lie on his back while his friend went to find someone who could organize a stretcher to carry him out. So it's a bit random, but you will produce a story that feels like a long distance drive, and you can figure out how much to push your engine. So that is the London-Syndey marathon game. You'll learn geography. You'll have some interesting rolls. Probably take about an hour or so, maybe 2 to play. It's a little bit ugly in terms of like putting in all the little ticks, but they've added a fair bit of verve with the cards. They've simulated some interesting aspects of the drive, and towards the end, they've got the time controls actually bunch up, I realize now, which means that it increases it doesn't matter if people get ahead, basically, unless you get a hole, because you have to wait at every time control. So purely just going first at the end will determine who lands on the last space. And that means that as these get much smaller, you have to be you're rolling fewer and fewer dice, and you're actually making it a really nice crescendo at the end, because the differences here are going to be like 1s and 2s and 3s. So you actually get a tight competition. You really have to think hard about whether you're going to cross over some of these, and because it just cares about time. It doesn't matter who gets there first. It's all about how many delays you had, and whether you took that extra turn to slow down too much, way back in India, which is interesting. You won't know really to the end who has driven the best time. So they've accurately covered that. Also, interestingly, again for the period, we've got Indigenous people depicted on the map, which was pretty common, a way of showing Indigenous inhabitants at the time. Anyway, a lovely little bit of fun. I might actually play it. I might take it, play it with my family. I'll show it to some others. I'm a bit of a nut for board game history. I think it's fascinating to see how people played in the past. And I'm not someone who believes in like modern game design as being suddenly better. I think we've got a lot more tools in our tool belt and things have really changed. But I think, you know, if you look at the things that Lizzie Maggie was writing 100 years ago, right, she understood the basic principles of game design. So did, you know, James Wallace 400 years ago. We've got some new ideas in the last 50 years because we understand a little bit more about psychology, but game design is an old art, and we're not, you know, modern games aren't necessarily better. We just have more tools that we can use and more technology. And I think the idea that old games are bad comes mostly from playing bad games like Monopoly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little trip back to 1968. And if you find me in Sydney, let's have a game.